help. Actually, my parents.
Yesterday, I was hit by a car driven by my MIL, Lorene, and was rushed to the hospital. After the surgery, while I was resting, my husband called me.
After you were taken away yesterday, the police came, but I told them you got scared by the car and fell, and now today, Mom is saying she hit you.
Summarizing my husband's excited rambling, it seems both my in-laws were taken to the police station. Indeed, yesterday, I was hit and injured by the car Lorene was driving. Yet, the person who drove, Lorene, and the passenger, my FIL Larry, had lied. They had conspired under my husband's instructions to make it seem like I had fallen and injured myself. I was dumbfounded and lost for words for a while.
Hey! Are you listening? Anyway, you need to go and explain yourself that you just fell.
These were the first words he spoke to me after I was rushed to the emergency. My anger reached its limit, and I decided to take revenge on my husband and in-laws. They must think I'll always do as they wish, but not anymore. That's when it hit me. Yes, this will surely prove that Lorene hit me. With my body still in pain, I reached for my smartphone again. My name is Alicia, 50 years old. Since getting married, I've been a housewife. I met my husband Colt in my 20s, in a typical office romance. He was assigned to take care of me when I joined as a new graduate. Even back then, my husband wasn't particularly handsome, nor did he have traits that were attractive to women. Of course, at that time, I didn't have any romantic feelings for him. I never once considered him in a romantic way, just diligently followed his orders every day. However, after working together for a while, he took a liking to me. He must have been happy to have a subordinate close in age, but gradually I realized it was more than that. Initially, I wasn't keen, but being flattered every day made me feel better. Thinking about it calmly, I don't know what he liked about me. But I got carried away by his sweet talk, and we ended up dating. Though we worked together for a while, about a year later, he proposed. I had no particular reason to refuse, so I accepted his proposal. Convincing myself that this was just how things are, I started a new life. Upon his insistence, I quit my job to become a housewife and, without any say, started living with his parents. I had visited my in-laws a few times after getting married, but never imagined I'd be living with them. When we met, they both welcomed me warmly, making me think there was nothing to worry about. By the time I realized, Larry had retired, and I was left alone with my in-laws while my husband was at work. There was hardly any sweet newlywed life, far from the marriage I had imagined. At first, they seemed somewhat considerate, but gradually their attitude towards me changed. Lorene's demands grew day by day, and the stress was crushing me.
Because of Colt, you get to be a housewife, so you should at least be perfect at household chores, right?
Every time something didn't please her, Lorene would scold me with delight. She never doubted that educating a bad daughter-in-law was her mission, as if it gave her life meaning. Lorene herself had lived with her mother-in-law. I remember when I got tired of hearing her old stories. Times and values have changed since then. Being forced to accept such mindsets was nothing but annoying. Yet, due to my position, I had no choice but to silently endure her nagging. Lorene would go out to karaoke with friends of her age a few times a week, and it seems they would enjoy talking badly about their daughters-in-law. Strangely, my daughter-in-law is so competent. Is not what they brag about, but rather, such a terrible daughter-in-law, is what they take pride in discussing. Hearing such stories, I wondered if I would end up like them someday, which made me feel gloomy. As for Larry, he wasn't on my side either. Though he didn't antagonize me as much as Lorene, he complained about my cooking almost every day.
Today's seasoning is especially strong. Are you serving such unhealthy food because you wish the elderly would just disappear?
He feels like an outdated man from a bygone era, clearly looking down on women. He often says things like women should be a certain way, suggesting women need to be more considerate and help without being asked. It's embarrassing just listening to him, laying out his idealistic views, thinking he can remain the same and act all high and mighty no matter his age. Larry seems more about boasting his views to me rather than harassing me, proud of his own thoughts. He'll never realize his mistakes and will just grow older in this manner. Just like those unpleasant in-laws you see in dramas. I've talked to my husband about them numerous times, but he always gives vague responses. Moreover, as our marriage has progressed, he's begun to criticize me for speaking up.
You should be kinder to dad and mom since they're old.
Isn't that a wife's duty? Like father, like son. Following in his parents' footsteps, my husband has also started to take me for granted and look down on me. He does nothing to help around the house when he comes back, just sits there as if it's the norm. Having children might have changed things, but we were unable to have any. We tried fertility treatments until our late 30s, but it never happened. Right after we got married.
When will I see my grandchild's face?
Lorene would pressure me almost daily, asking. It's not solely my fault, and children are a blessing. Creating children just for the in-laws is absurd. I thought there was no need to force it, so I gave up when I turned 40. In this less than happy life, there were people who helped me. A couple living across the street. The husband, Dawson, and his wife, Bethany, lived together without children. Dawson's mother struggled living with her mother-in-law and decided he didn't want to cause such trouble. Bethany was there for me during my struggles with infertility and would listen to my complaints about my in-laws. Since my in-laws and husband have a good public image, Bethany was surprised at first.
I thought your husband was a good man, but to see he still hasn't cut the apron strings at this age, honestly, it's a bit off-putting.
Thanks to Bethany, I've been able to live through this life without feeling too burdened. Lorene, now over 75, still drives herself around. It's precarious to watch, and despite my warnings to my husband, he doesn't listen. When I suggest she should give up her license.
Are you making fun of Mom?
He gets furious, thinking I'm insulting his mother. I've tried hinting at it to Lorene, but she seems to think she's still quite young.
Are you treating me like an old woman?
How unpleasant. And she, like my husband, gets furious. I've been worried something serious might happen, and that day came in an unexpected way. That day, as usual, I walked to the nearby supermarket for groceries. Walking is mostly my mode of transportation since I don't have a driver's license. I thought I'd get it after starting work, but I got married sooner than expected. When I consulted my husband,
you don't need one since I'll drive.
He opposed the idea of me getting a license. On sale days, the bags are inevitably heavy, but asking my husband or Lorene for a ride is out of the question. My husband, who once happily offered rides, now just clicks his tongue in denial. Carrying heavy bags, I returned home when I noticed the garage door was open.
Did she say she was going out today?
Lorene hadn't mentioned anything when I left the house. Well, it doesn't matter, I thought, as I passed by the garage heading towards the entrance. That's when it happened. With a roaring engine, a car sped out of the garage. Such a foolish word slipped out in surprise. The next moment, the car, without slowing down, crashed into me. The impact sent me flying backward, groceries spilling from my bags. Lying there, I was slammed onto the asphalt ground. Unable to grasp what had happened, a severe pain assaulted the back of my head where it hit the ground. Trying to get up was futile. My body wouldn't listen, and all I could do was stare at the sky. How much time had passed? Before I knew it, Bethany was peering down at me.
Hang in there. I've called an ambulance. It's going to be okay.
Bethany's face, as she spoke to me, was pale and strained. Had things really become so serious? That was the naive question that crossed my mind. Moving my aching head slightly, I could see blood flowing from it. Seeing that, I gradually began to understand the gravity of my situation. I started to realize the seriousness of the situation. But there was nothing I could do, as my body remained immobile. Eventually, I could hear the ambulance approaching, little by little.
Just a bit more. It's almost here. Hang on.
Bethany urged me desperately, as my head started to feel foggy.
No. Just a little longer.
Contrary to Bethany's words, I closed my eyes. When I next opened them, I was lying in a hospital bed. An 4 tube was attached to my hand, and I could see the fluid dripping without pause. Realizing I had been saved, tears naturally started to flow. Moving my head even slightly caused intense pain. Given the amount of blood I had lost, it was no wonder it hurt. Moaning on the bed, a nurse hurried over.
You shouldn't move your head yet.
There were so many things I wanted to ask, but I silently listened to the nurse's explanation. According to her, a day had passed since the accident. I had been rushed to the hospital by the ambulance team called by Bethany. I underwent surgery to stitch up my head and was saved. Bethany had stayed with me all this time, and now, outside visiting hours, she had gone home. It seems she had also contacted my husband, but after conveying the surgery's success, that was it. My whole body ached, but there was no life-threatening danger, and I was told to rest for a while. Even so, I didn't want to do anything for the time being. There were many things I needed to think about, but I closed my eyes anyway. Soon after, my phone beside the bed kept ringing. I didn't want to answer it, so I left it, but the persistent calls continued. After ignoring it several times, it didn't seem like it would stop. Careful not to move my head, I groped for my phone and saw Colt's name on the screen. Feeling a bit relieved that he might actually be worried, I answered the phone.
Help! Actually, my parents.
My husband started speaking without letting me say a word.
After you were taken away yesterday, the police came, but I told them you were startled by the car and fell. And now today, there's a testimony that Mom hit you.
Summarizing my husband's excited rant, it seemed both my in-laws had been taken to the police station. Indeed, yesterday, I was indeed hit and injured by the car Lorene was driving. Yet, the person who drove, Lorene, and the passenger, Raphael Larry, had lied. They had conspired under my husband's instructions to make it seem like I had fallen and injured myself. I was dumbfounded and lost for words for a while.
The car, fortunately, wasn't damaged. Dad wasn't hurt, but Mom twisted her neck a bit from the collision with you. And yet, it's unfair how the police are being one-sided.
Unaware of my astonishment, he was worried about the car and his parents. How rotten can this family be? Since answering the phone, had he said even one word of concern for me? No, nothing. He was only worried about his parents being taken to the police, even going so far as to ask me, the victim, to prove their innocence.
Hey! Are you listening? Anyway, you need to go and explain that you just fell.
The number you have dialed is currently. Although my husband had been talking nonstop since the call connected, he was surprised by the first words I finally spoke.
Eh?
I then immediately hung up the phone. Afterward, calls from my husband continued for a while, but frustrated, I set my phone to reject his calls. Later, I found out that, just as my husband had said on the phone, my in-laws were taken to the police station. After a while, my husband himself was also taken to the police station where his parents were waiting. The entire episode was witnessed by Bethany, who lives across the street. Initially, it was Bethany who reported Lorraine's crime to the police. After riding in the ambulance with me and taking care of various procedures in place of my husband, she was questioned by the police about the accident. It seems she was questioned after the in-laws had been, making her testimony somewhat of a corroboration. Bethany noticed the accident when she heard a loud noise outside. Looking out the window, she saw me lying on the road. She then hurriedly called an ambulance and rushed outside. By then, Lorraine's car was nowhere to be seen, and she didn't understand what had happened. More than figuring out the cause, she was concerned for my well-being. Bethany told the police everything as it was. However, the in-laws immediately denied any police suggestions that I might have been hit by a car. Feeling something was off, Bethany pondered for a while even after the police officer had left. After seeing my surgery through, she went home and discussed it with her husband, Dawson. Then, Dawson came up with an unexpected solution.
The dash cam, it records 24/7. The scene should be right in front of the car, so it must have captured everything.
Together, they checked the camera installed in their car.
Just as I thought.
As Dawson predicted, the moment of the accident was recorded. There, unmistakably, was the moment Lorraine hit me with her car. After I fell, Larry's face appeared from the car window, but then the car drove off quickly. A clear hit and run. With the footage of the in-laws' crime in hand, the two went to the police station. And they proved that I hadn't simply fallen and injured myself. Upon receiving testimony from Bethany and others, the police immediately began questioning the in-laws. Despite the video evidence, the in-laws were reluctant to admit their guilt.
That video is fabricated. Someone is trying to frame me. Officer, please, you can't put an old woman in jail, can you?
Both Lorraine and Larry were embarrassingly defiant. Eventually, Lorraine admitted to the crime, saying,
"My son told me to hide it."
Indeed, my husband had instructed them to coordinate their stories. But to think Lorraine would betray her own son to save herself was beyond belief. Worn out from the interrogation, Larry confessed that although he was in the passenger seat, they fled, abandoning me. Upon their confessions, the police questioned my husband, who was also reluctant to admit his involvement. Then, a detective came to my hospital room.
"Your parents both claim they were instructed by their son to cover up the accident. Initially, they lied extensively, but this seems to be the truth."
The detective proceeded with the conversation apologetically, considering my feelings. The car showed no significant damage or dents. If my husband had worried about damage to the car and had it repaired, that would constitute evidence tampering. However, my husband must have decided calmly that it wasn't necessary. Since then, I've had no desire to see my husband, who hasn't shown his face at all. I mentioned to the detective about the call from my husband during the in-laws' questioning. He had admitted to instructing his parents to align their stories. Hearing this, the detective sighed deeply.
"I don't know what to say. I can only imagine how you feel."
The detective seemed to sympathize with me, having been betrayed by my family on top of suffering a serious injury. After a painful silence, the detective left the room. A few days later, as I was about to be discharged, the police contacted me again. Bethany, who came to pick me up from the hospital in place of my husband, drove me straight to the police station. There, the detective from the previous day greeted us. It turned out he was the same one who had heard the story from Bethany, and he led us together to a room. Inside, there were my haggard husband and in-laws. Alicia. As I entered the room guided by the detective, Lorraine suddenly began to tear up. I thought it was pretentious, but it seemed she was genuinely crying. Whether she felt relieved to see a family member or relieved to see me alive, I couldn't tell. We were shown to our seats and waited until Lorene had calmed down. We waited until Lorene regained her composure, comforted by a female officer. Finally calm enough to speak, Lorene, sitting next to Larry, who looked utterly exhausted, kept repeating, "I'm sorry." The specific agenda for the day was to align the details of the accident with me, the victim, involved. A screen was prepared, displaying the footage of the accident submitted by Bethany. As we watched, the detective progressed the conversation step by step. The in-laws answered the questions honestly, and I nodded in agreement, affirming the accuracy. The problem was whether my husband was involved. After hearing my story, his call history proved he had phoned me. Yet, he still claimed no recollection of instructing his parents, steadfastly denying his involvement. I hadn't recorded our conversation, so progress was difficult.
"You just want to bring me down too, you liar,"
my husband exclaimed at one point, becoming emotional despite the detective's attempts to calm him.
"Please stop. Lying further will only lead to your regret. Do you really want to betray your mom and dad just to save yourself?"
Lorene advised, but he wouldn't accept it. Feeling stuck, the detective intervened.
"So, you're saying your parents provided false testimony to the police?"
His words had a different weight than mine, silencing my husband.
"Your mother running you over is clearly captured in the footage, acknowledged by both of your parents. But according to you, your parents are attempting to lessen their guilt by implicating you as a co-conspirator."
The gravity of the detective's words made my husband's face contort.
"Do you understand? Your parents' crime becomes even more severe,"
he continued, leading my husband to finally admit his guilt. In the end, I must have realized the gravity of what was happening. The confession of my husband laid bare the crimes of all three. This prompted the police officers waiting in the room to start moving hurriedly.
"Regarding that,"
now a detective addressed me, questioning whether I would withdraw the complaint. The crimes committed by the three couldn't be erased, but this could significantly change their fate. However, I firmly refused.
"Though I was unharmed, fleeing right after the accident is inexcusable. I will file a complaint to ensure they are held accountable for their actions."
My decision caused a great stir among the three. Lorene cried out loud, and both Larry and my husband hung their heads in shame right there. They probably hadn't expected me to make such a ruthless decision. Each of them had never doubted they were a good husband, a good Lorene, and a good Larry. It seemed they had taken my forgiveness for granted. If the family had handled the aftermath of the accident properly, I wouldn't have gone this far. But my in-laws decided to sacrifice my life to protect themselves. My husband chose to prioritize his parents and social appearance over his wife's life. I wanted them to reflect on the severity of their actions and properly atone for their sins. Silently, I stood up and left the room. Accompanied by Bethany, I began the various procedures in another room. These were my in-laws and husband I had lived with for years. It would be a lie to say my heart wasn't aching. Above all, I was the one who was hurt the most. Even though my physical wounds had healed, this trauma would follow me for life. I hadn't done anything wrong, yet I couldn't feel completely relieved. By the time I left the police station, the day had completely darkened. Bethany, considering my feelings, invited me to a dinner party as a celebration of my discharge. Grateful for my friend's thoughtfulness, I headed to Bethany's house. Warmly welcomed by Bethany and Dawson, we enjoyed a meal together. There, I laughed for the first time in a while. Both of them, while being considerate, treated me as usual. Even though the in-laws and husband who looked down on me were gone, I was now on my own. There were still legal proceedings and many things to do. Just thinking about it made me feel disheartened. But for that moment, I forgot all about it and truly enjoyed myself. After a delightful night, I decided to divorce my husband. There was no need to torment myself any further. It seemed he had learned a little from this incident, but I realized I couldn't love him anymore. I immediately signed the divorce papers and broached the subject of divorce with my husband. He initially seemed surprised at the divorce papers, but soon consented as if he understood. Unable to bear seeing my husband's pitiful state any longer, I left everything to my lawyer thereafter. The three faced criminal charges, and in addition, were ordered to pay me compensation in the divorce proceedings. Since the fault was on my husband, I received even more compensation from the divorce. Determined to leave my in-laws' house, I rented an apartment with the compensation from the divorce proceedings. I planned to start anew far away, but I decided to stay in the city I was familiar with. The reason I didn't move far away was because Bethany's husband, Dawson, ran a company. He invited me to help out at his company. Bethany was also helping with the work, and I thought it would be good to try it together. Although I had been invited several times before, I had given up due to what my in-laws and husband might say. Honestly, with the compensation from the divorce proceedings, I didn't need to work. But Bethany and Dawson were concerned about my well-being. Suddenly being alone, they gave me a purpose in life. Having spent decades as a housewife, working with a friend was very enjoyable. I was confused by all the new experiences, but they became a significant source of fulfillment for me. Thus, I embarked on a new life, and even more encounters awaited me. I ended up remarrying a man I met through work. I had told him about the divorce, but kept silent about the compensation until we got married. Yet, he didn't blame me.
It's natural to be cautious after going through so much,
he said with a smile. Past midlife, my life took a significant turn. I am probably happier and more fulfilled now than when I was younger. Despite being betrayed and hurt by those I had trusted for years, I grasped a greater happiness. Grateful to the friend and her husband who always extended their hands to me, I now step into a brighter future.
A housekeeper who doesn't even cook is grounds for divorce, right?
Benjamin, my husband, punched me in the stomach. I don't think he put much force into it. But that's where my precious baby is.
Hey! Stop it!
I was so surprised by Benjamin's unexpected behavior that I overreacted. Seeing this, Benjamin let out a cheerful laugh.
If you don't like it, just make lunch already. See, even the kid is saying, "Poor daddy, starving because of mommy." Okay, I get it. Just stop. Just don't hit my stomach.
I screamed almost like a shriek, and finally, Benjamin stopped his hand.
I'm tired. Just do as you're told from the start. Make it quickly, right now.
Satisfied with his own words, Benjamin looked up with content. And then, he froze as he looked at the computer screen in front of him. What? Somehow, I got off the chair, kept Benjamin at bay with scissors nearby, and said,
"This time, I won't let you make excuses. Well, not that you'll need to."
You. This has to be a lie. I won't let him get away with excuses this time. I'll expose his true nature for sure. My name is Evelyn, I'm 29. I work at an electronics manufacturer, but I'm currently on maternity leave, so I'm almost like a housewife. I say almost because there's a reason. I do some chores and participate in irregular remote meetings. That's the only thing I insist on. The reason is, I handed over the project I was involved in to my junior when I got pregnant. I wanted to know the progress, so I insisted on participating. But I hardly ever speak up, it's more like I'm just observing. Still, I was happy to participate and know how the project is progressing. But that's just working for free. It's a waste of time. You should quit. The one grumbling with dissatisfaction is my husband, Benjamin. He's 36, 7 years my senior. Originally, he was my boss at work. Benjamin, competent at his job, was always relied upon by those around him. Furthermore, I was struck by his kindness and guidance, and before I knew it, I was drawn to him. It was considered lucky to have married someone like Benjamin, and many envied us, but after we got married, he changed. Don't say things like that. My job is just doing odd jobs and attending meetings, you know? Sometimes, I'm just observing. That's a waste of time. If you have time like that, why don't you clean the room? I've noticed dust accumulating under the furniture lately. Benjamin pointed at the gap between the TV stand and the floor. That spot can't be cleaned without crouching down. Now in my last month of pregnancy, it's utterly impossible to crouch with this belly, making it hard to breathe just from walking. So, indeed, I've neglected cleaning in some areas. I do what I can, but I'm sorry. Normally, a wife's parents would come over to help with the housework at a time like this. But you don't have that, do you? Benjamin said this with a sigh. My heart ached. My parents died in an accident 10 years ago. It's been 10 years, but it still feels like just yesterday. Yet, Benjamin carelessly belittles me for not having parents like now. And I always ended up apologizing. I'm sorry for causing you trouble. Then, Benjamin would always smile with satisfaction. You're lucky to have married such a generous man like me. I never thought I'd marry an ordinary woman with no special qualities like you, Evelyn. This is how Benjamin satisfies his ego. It's a daily repetition of sarcasm and boasting. He wasn't like this before we got married. Maybe it's common for both men and women to change after marriage. Sadly, Benjamin has a very good public image, so when I complain to others, they don't believe me. I get irrelevant responses like, "You're just being spoiled," or "It's nice to have someone so reliable." I could have endured it if it were just as everyone says. I could just ignore it. But lately, I've been at my wit's end with Benjamin returning from work. When the doorbell rings from evening to night, that's the signal of his return. Even if I was in the middle of housework, I would stop everything and rush to the entrance. And while watching the door open, I'd hope, "Please, let Benjamin be in a good mood today." When he's in a good mood, it's just reports of the company's doing well or I landed a contract. The problem is when he's in a bad mood.
Arg, so annoying. Acting all high and mighty just because they're a client. Those outdated fools.
As soon as he enters the entrance, Benjamin is stomping around, angry. We welcome back. He throws his bag at me and heads to the shower, cursing me under his breath. This whole routine terrified me. When this continued day after day, I even considered divorce. I first talked to a coworker, but they didn't believe me. Benjamin? That's hard to believe. You're exaggerating. Look, you're pregnant and probably just tired, right? Maybe you need a change of scenery? It was as if they were saying I was the one being unreasonable. Sadly, I understand where my coworker is coming from. The Benjamin we worked with was perfect in everyone's eyes. Always smiling, gentle in his words and actions, and calm. It's hard to believe that he could change like this. I wouldn't have believed it myself in the past. Maybe it's just temporary. Perhaps he's just irritable because he's busy and tired. I decided to think positively. It's not like he's physically harmed me. Though my body tenses up when he throws things or yells, he's never hurt me. I'm sure someday Benjamin will be as kind as before. That's what I hoped and prayed. No one believes that Benjamin could change like this. But there was one person who might believe me. That was my uncle, Daniel. My grandparents live far away, and my parents have passed away. After the accident, I was left alone, but I had one relative I could rely on. That was my father's brother, Daniel. He had moved to New York before my father, so by chance, he lived close to our family. Daniel looks, honestly, intimidating. He's 6 feet 3 inches tall and well-built, so just standing there can be imposing. But on the inside, he's incredibly kind and wonderful. When I was young, Daniel would often play with me in place of my busy parents. Back then, I thought Daniel was unemployed. He spent that much time with me. I think he doted on me like I was his own daughter.
Actually, I was the first one to ever hold Evelyn, you know.
Daniel and my father would often joke and compete like that. So, after my parents passed away, it was Daniel who supported me. He took care of most of the arrangements while I was in a daze. When I couldn't even bring myself to eat, he'd make tasteless oatmeal or pasta that would fall off the fork with just a touch. It wasn't delicious, but I remember I ended up eating it anyway. It was also Daniel who found me a job when I dropped out of college after my parents' accident. I feel bad for using your connections. To my hesitation, Daniel kindly said, "Don't get it wrong, it's just an introduction. How you works from here on out is up to Evelyn. I won't know anything about it. What I couldn't repay to my parents, I want to repay to Daniel." That was my goal. I had endured living with Benjamin, who only spewed verbal abuse, but one day, Benjamin finally raised his hand to me. It might not have been intentional at first. I knew I had to be careful that day because Benjamin's mood was worse than usual. But I was also feeling unwell and didn't have the energy to deal with it. So, when Benjamin complained about everything, the dinner menu, my face, my expression, the housework, I accidentally muttered under my breath,
"Ah, enough, so annoying."
The moment those words left my mouth, I could feel the room freeze over. This is bad, I've done it now. I need to apologize quickly. I started to apologize immediately, but it was too late. A magazine flew right past my face. Benjamin, in his anger, threw it at me.
Hey! What did you just say? Did you just tell me, who's tired from work, that I'm annoying? Hey!
From there on, it was useless to say anything. Benjamin started throwing whatever was nearby, one after another. Fortunately, it seemed he still had some reason, as he only threw light or thin items. Having done it once, the barrier to doing it again must have lowered. From that day, even though he wasn't using much force, Benjamin started to raise his hand over trivial matters. Scared, I thought of consulting Daniel. Actually, Daniel works at the same company as us. He introduced me to this company because he could be more accommodating if it was his own company. Benjamin never mentioned Daniel, so he probably doesn't know we work for the same company. But I had introduced him before, so he was aware of Daniel as part of my family. I was sure Daniel would believe me. I had something like a conviction about it. But, unfortunately, Daniel was on an overseas business trip at the time. Concerned for me, "I can listen over the phone if that's okay," Daniel said. For a moment, I thought of leaning on him, but knowing Daniel, if he found out about my situation, he might fly back. That wouldn't be fair to the company or Daniel. Reluctantly, I decided to wait for Daniel's return. I tried consulting coworkers and friends, but no one believed me, as expected. Moreover, somehow, the fact that I was talking about Benjamin reached him. Benjamin then said, "I meant it as a form of affection." He apparently said this with a lonely smile. Everyone completely believed this excuse. As a result, I was treated as just a woman with an overactive imagination. One day, while I was working in the room as usual, Benjamin came in. Today is unusually a work-from-home day for Benjamin as well. I knew in advance because he told me.
I'm hungry, where's lunch?
Benjamin said, almost like he was throwing the words at me. Oh, just wait a bit. I'm working right now.
Huh?
Benjamin let out an annoyed tone. With that voice, I immediately understood. Here it comes. The usual thing. I braced myself in an instant, preparing mentally. Usually, it's an arm or a leg. And then, Benjamin, with an unpleasant smirk, approached me.
A housekeeper who doesn't even cook is grounds for divorce, right?
Benjamin punched me in the stomach. I don't think he put much force into it. But that's where my precious baby is.
Hey! Stop it!
I was so surprised by Benjamin's unexpected behavior that I overreacted. He had never laid a hand on my stomach before, no matter what. I curled up in the chair, trying to protect my belly with my arms, encircling it. Tears welled up in my eyes from fear and anxiety. Seeing this, Benjamin let out a cheerful laugh.
If you don't like it, just make lunch already. See, even the kid is saying, poor daddy, starving because of mommy. Ouch! Please. Please, stop.
How can he do such terrible things? I'm his wife, and the child in this belly is his. I couldn't understand at all.
I don't want to do this either, you know? But what can I do? It's because you won't make lunch. Right? Poor daddy, huh?
Even as he spoke, Benjamin's hand didn't stop. He kept hitting my stomach over and over, relentlessly. Resisting was difficult while sitting in the chair. I could only focus on defending myself.
Okay, I get it. Just stop. Just don't hit the stomach.
Screaming almost like a shriek, Benjamin finally stopped his hand.
I'm tired. Just do as you're told from the start. Make it quickly, right now.
Satisfied with his own words, Benjamin looked up contentedly. And then, he froze as he looked at the computer screen in front of him. What? Somehow, I got off the chair, kept Benjamin at bay with scissors nearby, and said, "This time, I won't let you make excuses." Well, not that you'll need to. This has to be a lie. The one to respond to the flustered Benjamin, turning pale, was someone on the computer.
I wish it were a lie. I never thought you could be such a despicable person.
The one holding his head on the screen was the manager. Other employees were also looking at this with faces of disbelief.
No, that's not true. I didn't hear anything. That's right. I was framed. I was deceived.
Trying to ingratiate himself, Benjamin clung to the computer.
That sounds terrible. I told you, didn't I? I'm working, so wait a bit. I haven't lied or deceived anyone. So, then you should have clearly said you were in a remote meeting. Then I would have.
Benjamin started to say, but caught himself. He was about to say, then I wouldn't have hit you. Benjamin, who cares so much about his public image and how he's perceived by society. The cunning and sly Benjamin wouldn't even utter a harsh word at the company, let alone raise a hand. That's why no one believed me when I complained. I felt a sense of despair at that time. But then I thought a bit. If they wouldn't believe me, I needed proof. Knowing there was a remote meeting while Benjamin was working from home, I had secretly plotted to expose his true face. I just hadn't expected him to aim for my stomach. That was a lapse in judgment on my part.
Anyway, everyone at the company is a witness now. You can't talk your way out of this. I want a divorce. I don't want to see your face ever again. But, Evelyn, I can't without you.
As Benjamin let out a pitiful voice, the doorbell chimed. Trying to head there, Benjamin blocked my way, trying to stop me.
Wait! We're in the middle of talking. Is it okay to raise your voice like that? The computer is still connected, you know?
Ah. Distracted and flustered, Benjamin let me slip by him towards the entrance. But just before I could get away, he caught up and grabbed my arm.
Stop! Let go! This spot is out of view from the computer, perfect. Hey, we need to come up with an excuse together. Should we say it was a prank? That's the safest bet. It'll be more believable coming from you, so you tell everyone. No way! I'm tired of watching your face, being worked like a slave, and living in fear.
Help me. Just as I screamed inside, I heard a noise from the entrance, and then the door burst open, and someone entered. Seeing who it was, I collapsed on the spot in relief.
Are you okay, Evelyn? Daniel.
It seems Daniel was secretly participating in that meeting too. He must have rushed over immediately after seeing the video. It was fortunate that the entrance door was unlocked.
Are you hurt? How's your stomach?
Daniel rushed to my side and pulled me away from Benjamin as if rescuing me. Then, shielding me with his own body from Benjamin, he hid me behind his back. Thanks to Daniel's broad back, I couldn't see Benjamin anymore. Likely, Benjamin couldn't see me either.
Daniel, Evelyn's uncle, right? Long time no see.
Peeking around Daniel's back, I saw Benjamin trying to force a smile and nodding in greeting. Daniel straightened up and looked down at Benjamin. Being considerably taller, Daniel made Benjamin look very small and frail.
Evelyn, can you stand? You should rest on that sofa over there.
Ignoring Benjamin, Daniel supported me and moved to the sofa. Sitting down provided some relief. Benjamin tried to approach me, but Daniel stopped him with a threatening look.
After you rest a bit, let's go to the hospital just to be safe.
That's an overreaction. It was just a little nudge. That's part of affection, a couple's touch.
How could anyone think that way about what happened?
You be quiet. We'll have a thorough discussion once we've confirmed that Evelyn and the baby are safe. Don't worry, the meeting was recorded.
So you saw that because you're with the same company. Benjamin made a fist in frustration and fell silent.
Evelyn, you married quite the man.
I felt sorry facing Daniel's stern look and sigh, unable to say anything. The hospital visit confirmed that the baby was fine. Relieved, I felt my whole body relax. Then, Daniel, Benjamin, and I decided to head to the company. Daniel said,
"Think of the baby. Leave the rest to me."
But this was a matter between Benjamin and me. Even if it's Daniel, I couldn't leave everything to him. We could have postponed it to another day, but knowing Benjamin, the more time he had, the more likely he was to come up with something. Now in the last month of pregnancy, with labor possibly starting at any time, it was best to resolve this quickly. I am a mother. I have a duty to ensure this child can be born into a safe environment. Upon arriving at the company, we were immediately led to a separate room. Daniel must have contacted them in advance. The employees present at the meeting must have also given their testimonies. In the large conference room were the meeting members, Benjamin, Daniel, and me. I took my bag from Daniel and pulled out the divorce papers. I had gotten them from the municipal office a long time ago and kept them in my bag. Benjamin looked puzzled for a moment, but then forced a troubled smile. I admit I did things that could be misunderstood. It's my fault too, so I'll accept the divorce. I have no problem with the compensation in the divorce court, and I'll pay child support. Perhaps because he was in front of everyone, Benjamin seemed unusually understanding. His acceptance made the conversation progress smoothly. However, when we reached a certain point, Benjamin froze. You want me to resign or transfer? Yes. I plan to return to work after my maternity and parental leave are over. It wouldn't be good for either of us if you were still here. That's why. I actually want you to leave. Benjamin stared at me intently and nodded. I see. But what does the company think?
What are you trying to say?
Not to boast, but I believe I'm a valuable asset to the company. I have good performance. No issues with interpersonal relationships. Plus, I have a wide network among peers and clients. Indeed, the outwardly competent Benjamin could be considered an ace at the company. He was what you'd call a key player. He was so well regarded that it was said it was only a matter of time before he became an executive. On the other hand, you, for better or worse, is just an ordinary female employee. Oh, I'm not trying to belittle you. Just stating the facts. I understand. Moreover, as a mother of a young child, inevitably you'll take more leaves. You'll probably end up inconveniencing the company, coworkers, everyone. This was something I had considered since becoming pregnant. Without parents, I had no one to rely on. In any situation, I had to manage on my own. While it's an unavoidable circumstance, to the company, I might be seen as a troublesome employee. I couldn't help but understand what Benjamin was trying to say. He implied that the company would choose him, the valuable ace, over me, who brought the inconvenience of potential risks, even though he had caused this issue. See? So the best thing is to forget all this and get along again. That's the best for the baby too.
No, I can't do that.
What? Benjamin looked utterly astounded.
Just endure and accept it again? That's ridiculous. Nothing would change. Do you expect me to endure endless days of sarcasm, living like I'm in hell?
At my words, employees whispered among themselves, looking puzzledly at Benjamin. Especially the female employees glared at him coldly.
Well, sure, we had our disagreements as a couple. But it goes both ways. That's both ways? The balance is off. I was always the one being hurt.
Benjamin seemed unable to hide his agitation against my counterattack.
You're like a completely different person. What happened to you, Evelyn?
That's right. I've been enduring until now. I had hoped that maybe you would change someday. But I never thought you'd lay a hand on our child. The onlookers' gazes sharpened even more. Benjamin forced an awkward smile, his forehead beading with sweat. Evelyn, that's because... Getting back to the point, shall we leave it to the company to decide who should leave? Oh, yeah. Perhaps convinced he would be chosen.
Then, I'll go ahead and submit these divorce papers now. From this moment, you and I are strangers. Wait, Evelyn, goodbye.
I wanted to get away from him as quickly as possible. With Daniel by my side, I submitted the divorce papers. Despite Benjamin's strange confidence, it was certain he would be the one to leave. Although it felt slightly underhanded, Daniel is, after all, the CEO of our company. With the CEO on my side, the outcome was clear.
It does feel a bit unfair, though.
Muttering this, Daniel furrowed his brows sternly.
What's wrong with that? The fault lies with that man. To think he doesn't even remember the face of his own company's CEO and yet dares to call himself a valuable asset. The nerve!
I vented a little to Daniel. Daniel was red in the face with anger. Thanks to our talk, I felt much lighter. So, on the drive back from the city hall, we talked eagerly about the arrival of my child. I had no more worries. Now, I could give birth in peace. A few days later, I gave birth safely. It was a beautiful baby girl. Daniel came to the birth as well, shedding tears like he was welcoming his own grandchild. From Benjamin.
I want to meet her too.
I received a message. Has he forgotten what he did before our child was born?
It's too dangerous for you to meet her.
I replied, keeping a safe distance. While I'd prefer to cut ties completely, I left WhatsApp open as an escape route to avoid provoking him. He sends updates almost daily. After being fired, he managed to find employment in the same industry. However, due to the nature of the industry, rumors about Benjamin had already spread.
Everyone's cold to me, and I can't find a girlfriend,
he lamented. According to a coworker,
I'll never meet someone as good as Evelyn again.
Benjamin reportedly regretted his actions. If that were true, he shouldn't have done what he did. Currently, Daniel and I are discussing names for the child. We're struggling to come up with a good one. Moreover, Daniel was already head over heels.
I'm not letting this child get married off.
Showing an incredible amount of adoration. Though my parents couldn't see their grandchild, I'm glad Daniel is happy. Someday, when my child starts to speak, I want her to call Daniel Grandpa. I'm sure he'll cry, despite his imposing frame. I'm looking forward to it. I'm Jessica, a 38-year-old office worker. I have been married to my husband, Brandon, for 5 years now. However, we've been struggling to have children. Being the eldest and only son, Brandon has always been under pressure from his mother, Chloe, to have a boy since we got married. These days, few people care about the gender of their children, and either a son or daughter can be an heir. Brandon himself doesn't care about the gender and says there's no rush to have children. But Chloe sees me as an adversary and always tells me when Brandon's not around.
A woman who can't have children is useless in this family. If you can't have one, you might as well leave.
Her words have hurt me deeply.
I'm sorry, Chloe, but honestly, your words are very pressuring. I wish you wouldn't say such things.
I finally gathered the courage to express my feeling to Chloe. But she didn't understand it at all and became even more oppressive, telling me not to defy her. I was shocked. I never expected such words from her. At first, I endured it because she's Brandon's mother and I didn't want to cause any trouble. But enduring Chloe's sarcasm while undergoing fertility treatments was mentally taxing, and my health started to decline. Realizing I couldn't hide it anymore, I confided in Brandon. Furious, Brandon sternly warned Chloe, which stopped her surprise visits to our apartment for a while, but she continued to hurl insults daily through WhatsApp. Then one day, I found out I was pregnant at the fertility clinic. The first sight of the fetal ultrasound filled me with indescribable emotions. When I showed Brandon the ultrasound at home, we both cried tears of joy. But our happiness was short-lived as I remembered a significant problem. Chloe. Telling her about the pregnancy would surely lead to her frequent visits, insisting that pregnancy isn't an illness, telling me to move around, or bragging about her own experiences. The doctor advised me not to overexert myself until a heartbeat is confirmed, so I was torn about what to do. After discussing with Brandon, we decided I should stay at my parents' house for a while. If I'm at my parents' house, even if I'm not feeling well, my parents are there, and Chloe won't make a surprise visit to my parents' house. It's close to my workplace and Chloe wouldn't barge in there. I called my mother right away, explaining about the pregnancy in Chloe, and decided to return home for a while. Brandon drove me to my parents' house, where they were overjoyed about my pregnancy. After greeting my parents, Brandon returned to our apartment. Being back at my parents' house, away from Chloe, brought me peace of mind. Soon after, morning sickness hit, and I spent days in bed. At work, my pale face raised concerns, and my boss suggested me to take a break, which I gratefully accepted. Many women at my job, including those who have undergone fertility treatments, understood my situation. Their support was comforting. Other than severe morning sickness, my pregnancy was uneventful, and the baby grew healthily. Feeling the first kicks was indescribably touching, and I lovingly caressed my belly every day. In fact, Brandon and I had already planned to move to a bigger house once we had a child. The reason is, our apartment was getting old, and while it's fine for just the two of us, it felt inconvenient for raising a child. We had set various criteria like proximity to stations, hospitals, and shopping facilities, and were searching accordingly. Then, Brandon suddenly sent me a photo. It was of a new high-rise condominium near the station. The area around the condo had everything needed for living, like commercial facilities and hospitals, and it was close to nurseries and schools, making it convenient for kids in the future. Completion is expected next month, and I casually entered a lottery for it. Surprisingly, we won. If you don't like it, we can just transfer it to someone else. Jessica, you can see it and decide. Hearing this, I immediately opened their website, was taken aback by the stylish design of the rooms, and exclaimed,
What?
The latest system kitchen, a bathroom with a sauna. Moreover, the unit we won was on the top floor of the 30-story building. The view from the window was amazing. I was a bit hesitant about the price, but Brandon works at a top-tier company, and with our salaries, we could afford it, so I decided to sign the contract for this condominium. Of course, I couldn't keep the purchase of a new high-rise condominium from my in-laws. I talked about it through Austin, my father-in-law. Austin said, "It's impressive that you young ones bought a condominium. If you need anything, I'm here to help." However, Chloe was not happy about this. When she found out we bought a high-rise condo, she was upset that we weren't living with her. Then, an incident happened. A week after moving in, Chloe suddenly visited. As usual, she went around the room complaining, but I entertained her with a smile. Then, suddenly, Chloe said she dropped her keys near the emergency stairs.
What? Why did you drop your keys by the emergency stairs? Don't tell me you climbed all the way up here?
I said, but apparently, she had dropped them while checking where the emergency stairs were, just in case. I went to the emergency stairs instead of Chloe to get the keys. At that moment,
I'm taking this house.
I was suddenly pushed from behind, lost my balance, and fell down the stairs.
Ouch! Help, somebody!
Unable to stand due to pain and shock, I suddenly felt warm water flowing around my feet. Realizing I had probably broken my water, I thought about calling an ambulance, but since I had hit my head hard, I lost consciousness. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed. Brandon was there, looking worriedly at me.
Jessica, are you okay?
Brandon asked, visibly shaken, as I woke up.
Where am I? What happened to me?
I was still confused from just waking up and had a fuzzy consciousness from the head injury. When I touched my stomach, I felt something was off. My stomach, which was big until recently, had shrunk. Realizing this, I felt the blood drain from my face.
Hey, why is my stomach like this? Where's my baby? Where did my baby go?
I asked Brandon. Then Brandon quietly began to speak. The baby in your belly is. The moment I heard those words, I couldn't stop my tears and began crying out loud in the hospital room. Someone on the same floor found me, noticing the emergency staircase door left open. When they went to close it, they found me collapsed and hurriedly called an ambulance. Brandon asked why I approached the emergency stairs, so I explained everything about my interaction with Chloe. I was mentally harassed by Chloe when Brandon wasn't around before, which had once caused me to fall ill. Because of that, Brandon instructed me to always carry a voice recorder. Of course, I started recording the moment Chloe showed up unannounced. After listening to the voice recorder, it was clear that Chloe was the culprit. Brandon was furious to learn that his own mother had done such a thing. Then, a call came in on Brandon's mobile phone from a relative. On the call, Brandon heard a shocking fact. It seemed Chloe, thinking the baby had died, was telling relatives while crying. "Oh, my poor sweet grandchild has gone to heaven. It's so sad. It's because Jessica, even though she's pregnant, went out riding a bicycle." She was making up absurd stories. However, Austin, who was present, had heard nothing like that from either me or Brandon and was looking at Chloe in utter disbelief. It seemed impossible that Austin didn't know anything about it. And the idea of a woman in her 9th month of pregnancy riding a bicycle. That's why the relative called Brandon. It was unbelievable. Then Brandon, taking the voice recorder, said,
"Jessica, let me borrow this for a bit. Can you leave the rest to me?"
He then left the hospital room. As Brandon left, my parents arrived. After I explained everything, they were both shocked and angry. I decided to trust Brandon and wait in the hospital room for the outcome. Meanwhile, Brandon met with the relative who had called him. It turned out Chloe was gathering relatives at her house, explaining the incident. Of course, her words were nonsense, and she was just trying to make herself look innocent. Some relatives believed Chloe and wept, while others were skeptical and viewed her with suspicion. Suddenly, Brandon burst in, causing Chloe to look at him in surprise. "Huh? Brandon, why are you here? You were supposed to be with Jessica. She needs you. It's so sad about the baby. I was looking forward to its birth," Chloe said, even feigning tears. At that moment, something snapped in Brandon.
"Enough, Mom. I know everything. You pushed Jessica down the emergency stairs,"
he said, pulling out the voice recorder in front of the relatives. Everyone was shocked to hear the conversation recorded so vividly. Who heard the voice could not hide their surprise.
"Is this true?"
Austin, whose face turned pale due to the shock, asked Chloe.
"No, that's not true. This is nonsense. I didn't go near the emergency stairs."
Even after hearing the recording, Chloe insisted she hadn't done it. However, there was a security camera nearby, and its footage would surely show me and Chloe entering the emergency stairwell. When Brandon mentioned this, Chloe, who had been speaking fluently until then, turned pale and began to tremble.
"How awful. We're family, aren't we? How dare you shame your own mother like this?"
Chloe clung to Brandon, insisting she was innocent and that it was Jessica who had slipped on her own. Even if that were true, leaving someone who had fallen and not helping them is questionable. However, the relatives who had already heard the voice recording did not believe Chloe's story. Instead, they urged her to go to the police and turn herself in.
"It's not me. I'm not the bad one. You understand, don't you? You know I'm not the kind of person who would do this. Prove it in front of everyone."
Chloe desperately appealed to Austin to affirm her innocence. But no one believed Chloe's story anymore. Soon, the police arrived, and from the audio and the subsequent security camera footage, it was clear that Chloe was the perpetrator. She was taken to the police station and arrested. The reason she did this was because the baby was a girl. Chloe had always been fixated on having a grandson, and when she found out the baby in the womb was a girl, she was disappointed. She thought that by pretending this baby never existed, she could try for a boy next time. When I heard this from the police, my head went blank with shock. Despite all that had happened, the baby grew healthily in an incubator and was discharged after 2 months. A few days after coming home from the hospital, Austin visited our apartment to apologize for the incident. He said that he and Chloe had divorced, that their house was sold, and he was going to move back to his family home. It was sad that the house where Brandon had grown up was gone, but since Austin wasn't to blame, we told him he was always welcome to visit. We regularly let Austin see his granddaughter after that. He adored his first grandchild and played with her with such kindness in his eyes. 3 years later, our second child, a boy, was born. Our daughter, now a big sister, couldn't wait to take care of her brother and was always by his side. Watching them was heartwarming, and every day was filled with happiness. But that happiness was disrupted by a visit from someone. The doorbell rang repeatedly, and when I checked the monitor, to my surprise, it was Chloe. I thought I would never see her again, and seeing her brought back memories of that day, making me feel nauseous. "What do you want now?" "I have no intention of seeing you again. Please leave," I said, but Chloe wouldn't listen. Apparently, Chloe had fallen ill, struggling daily with her health and finding it difficult to go to the hospital without a car. She had divorced Austin, and their house was now just an empty lot. She had no one else to turn to for help. Shockingly, Chloe knew I had given birth to a boy. She had apparently seen us in town, noticing Brandon holding our son. To Chloe, it was the long-desired grandson. She was determined to live with us and make the boy fond of her. "So you finally became a proper woman, giving birth to a boy. When you were pregnant with a girl, I was so disappointed in you. But now that you've had a boy, let's forget the past and live together, shall we?" For a moment, I doubted my own ears. Live together after all that? Impossible. What are you talking about? After what you did, living together is impossible. Leave now, or I'll call the police. Unfortunately, Brandon was at work at this crucial time. In distress, I immediately called Austin. He was supposed to visit the apartment today to see his son and daughter. With trembling hands, I called Austin. It turned out he was already near the apartment, so he hurried over. When Austin arrived, Chloe exclaimed in surprise. We couldn't argue in the entrance of the apartment building, as it would disturb others. But I had no intention of letting Chloe, whom we had cut ties with, into our apartment again. I gave Chloe an ultimatum, telling her I would call the police if she really didn't leave. Realizing her wish wouldn't be fulfilled, Chloe started to create a scene at the entrance and began arguing with Austin. Troubled, I contacted Brandon at work. After hearing the situation, Brandon called the police, and they soon arrived at our apartment. The police, understanding the situation, took Chloe away in a police car. As the commotion was in a conspicuous place, several residents of the apartment witnessed it. I felt sorry for causing inconvenience to many people. Later, after Brandon returned home, we discussed the situation with Austin and decided to move. As long as we lived here, Chloe would surely come back. We couldn't risk something happening to the children next time. Besides, Austin, though he said he had gone back to his family home, was living alone since his parents had passed away. Our daughter liked Austin and had previously expressed a desire to live with him. Austin is a kind person, and leaving him alone at his age worried us. When we proposed living together, Austin was very happy, despite everything that had happened. Afterwards, we bought a used property in the next town. Though it was second-hand, the house itself was very nice, and the surrounding environment was good too. Living in a high-rise was nice, but raising children in a place surrounded by nature seemed better. Right after moving, my daughter and Austin went to a mountain to hunt for beetles. Seeing them so happy made me feel that deciding to live together and choosing this place was the right decision. Once a month, we invite my parents over, and we all enjoy a home party, leading a happy life. Meanwhile, according to someone I was close with at the high-rise apartment, Chloe, undeterred, visited the high-rise again. But when told we had moved and she couldn't find out where, she left disappointed. If it weren't for what happened, Chloe might have been here, feeling the children's growth with us. Well, it's a natural consequence, but still. Later, I heard Chloe reluctantly returned to her hometown, rented a small apartment, and now lives a lonely life, working part-time in cleaning. Right. I forgot. she exclaimed, rummaging through her small bag to pull out a white envelope. "What's this?" "It's a letter I got from Grandma. She told me to read it in secret, away from Caleb." I took the letter from Scarlett. Just then, my sister arrived to pick Scarlett up, and I handed her over. After saying goodbye to Scarlett, I quietly opened the letter. Glancing over it casually, I was shocked.
What? You're kidding, right?
The content was hard to believe. Rushed, I went back to where Caleb was. As soon as I returned, Caleb spoke in a whiny tone. "Hey Evelyn, I'm thirsty. Could you get me some juice or something?" Ignoring his request, I swiftly flipped back the comforter and reached for Caleb's pants.
"What? Evelyn?
Without hesitation, I pulled down his pants.
What the heck are you doing all of a sudden?"
Caleb yelled, hastily trying to pull his pants back up. I sighed at the unfolding scene.
Looks like Mom's prediction was right. Hey! What's the deal with suddenly pulling down someone's pants? Are you taking advantage of my inability to move? That's awful, isn't it?
Caleb looked up at me, perplexed. Indeed, it was wrong to do it without saying anything. But without that, I wouldn't have been able to confirm it. My name is Evelyn, 32 years old. I graduated and joined the company, and it's been 10 years. With this tenure, I have a stable income and am trusted with various responsibilities at work. I've been leading a fulfilling life, but there was one worry. It's about my husband, Caleb, whom I've been married to for 5 years. Our encounter was at a friend's wedding. We just happened to sit at the same table. Ah, weddings are wonderful, aren't they? Really, they both look so happy. We didn't talk much, but I was impressed by how genuinely happy Caleb seemed for the bride and groom. Later, through a friend, Caleb made the first move, and we started dating smoothly. "I want to marry you." After Caleb's straightforward proposal, we got married. The surprise came later.
What? You've been divorced before? And you have a child?
Yeah, and, you see, my ex-wife is demanding child support. Despite his divorce, his ability to genuinely celebrate others' weddings was, in a way, impressive.
About the child support, isn't it just better to pay it? That's part of being a father, right?
No, the thing is, I'm out of money this month.
What?
I had a sneaking suspicion that Caleb's income wasn't great. But I never imagined I'd end up paying child support for a child I didn't know with my salary.
I rushed into marriage.
I didn't regret marrying him, to be honest. But the real issue was Caleb's carelessness with money and his failure to see the problem.
"I quit my job again,"
he'd say with a nonchalant smile, time and time again. "You quit. What are we going to do now?" "It'll be fine. You're working too, Evelyn. We'll manage somehow." He was the definition of relying on others. I didn't want him to depend on my money.
Did he marry me for my money?
I sometimes wondered. But putting money aside, Caleb wasn't a bad husband. He was a bit unconventional, but that was what made life exciting and fun. Feeling like something sweet. Want to hit the convenience store? Now?
Yeah.
On a weekday night, on a whim, we'd end up at the convenience store, just for sweets.
All right. I'm not sleeping until I beat this game tonight.
Okay. Sometimes I'd end up pulling an all-nighter with him over a game. It was honestly tough at our age, but I didn't dislike his spirit. That's why I couldn't leave Caleb, despite his financial irresponsibility and job instability. He wasn't cheating, at least. I thought, as I let things slide, and before I knew it, here we were. But then, just the other day, I saw it. An unknown young woman sitting in the passenger seat of Caleb's car. I, who had prided myself on believing he would never cheat, felt like I'd been hit over the head from behind. The shock of Caleb's potential infidelity amidst my complete trust. Should I confront him directly or act covertly? After much thought, I consulted my sister. Married with an 8-year-old daughter, she had an immediate answer. Obviously, you gather evidence quietly. She was adamant that there was no benefit in alerting him without solid proof. So, following her advice, I focused on gathering evidence. Eventually, it became clear that Caleb was frequently seeing a woman. Her name is Abigail. She was the daughter of the owner of a private clinic where Caleb was a client. They mostly met on Thursday afternoons, driving around in Caleb's car. And I managed to capture them entering a hotel together several times.
I thought he was honest about women at least.
Disappointment hit me before anger. Married life wasn't unpleasant, but it wasn't easy either. In addition to the child support, I found out about his debt. Both were from before our marriage. Things I should have known about or were none of my business. He married me without disclosing these facts. Wasn't it almost like being deceived? There were times when I thought that. And I took pride in the fact that he was faithful. I never imagined even that would be betrayed.
I'll confront him with everything and then leave.
Caleb, carefree and nonchalant as ever, probably had no clue I knew about his secret. I wanted to give him a surprise for once. So, I was contemplating the day to reveal everything. Soon after, I received a shocking message from Caleb.
Sorry, I had an accident. I might not be able to move my body anymore.
I left work immediately and rushed to the hospital Caleb had mentioned. It was the clinic owned by Abigail's father. Feeling faint-hearted, I even called my mother to come with me. Are you Caleb's wife? Please, this way. I never imagined meeting this person under such circumstances. The one guiding us at the reception was Caleb's affair partner, Abigail. I had seen her face several times from behind or in profile over the past few months, but facing her directly like this felt surreal. Led to the room, I found Caleb lying in the bed.
Caleb!
Oh, Evelyn. You came. His voice and expression seemed good. My mother and I exchanged a relieved look. The message had startled us, but he seemed to have only minor injuries. What a relief, I thought. But then, the doctor's next words left me speechless.
There's a high possibility that Caleb has become hemiplegic. Hemiplegic? It means, in Caleb's case, the right half of his body might not move anymore. Is there no chance of recovery?
The doctor closed his eyes as if in deep thought. It's difficult. Then said. I found myself sobbing uncontrollably, supported by my mother. After calming down a bit, Caleb began to speak hesitantly.
This hospital, because of its facilities, can't accommodate long-term patients, so I'll be sent home.
But what about thorough examinations? Your right side isn't moving, right? There could be other reasons.
Well, I'm tired from the accident today. We'll revisit this. Caleb's words, somewhat hesitant, worried me, but I didn't want to push him. Reluctantly, I had my mother help me take Caleb back to our apartment. After laying Caleb in bed, I went out to the entrance to see off my mother.
Sorry for the sudden call today. Thank you. It's okay. But it seems the timing to confront him about the affair has vanished.
Indeed.
What will you do now?
If Caleb is truly hemiplegic, I can't abandon him just because he cheated.
I'll think about it.
Remember, you're the most important to me.
It seemed like my mother was advising me not to sacrifice myself for Caleb.
Thanks.
She seemed to want to say more, but left with a complex expression on her face. The next day, my life caring for Caleb began. Although he was hemiplegic, the other side of his body worked, so the need for care was less than I expected. However, soon, taking care of Caleb's mental health as he couldn't go outside became more challenging. I'm just so bored. Surprisingly, he didn't complain much about his immobility, but his frustration seemed to stem from boredom. He would summon me frequently for trivial things, like wanting juice or needing his back scratched. These were minor tasks, but the constant demands wore me down. During such moments, my sister's daughter, my niece Scarlett, suddenly decided to visit our home. Scarlett and Caleb hardly know each other. Why she would visit under these circumstances was initially a mystery to me. When I asked my sister why, her reply was nonchalant.
Obviously, because I am worried about you. Even Scarlett at 8 years old is concerned about you.
That's sweet of Scarlett. I'd join if I could, but I'm swamped with work, and it's all I can do to arrange transportation. Mom seems busy too, but at least with Scarlett around, Caleb won't be able to throw tantrums in front of a child. Her prediction was spot on. With Scarlett present, perhaps due to his male pride or just plain embarrassment, Caleb drastically reduced how often he called for me. This gave me a chance to chat with Scarlett about school life, the latest elementary school trends, and all sorts of girl talk. But why does enjoyable time always fly by so quickly? As evening approached, it was time for Scarlett to leave. My sister called to pick her up, and though it was hard to part, it was time to say goodbye to Scarlett. Okay, Scarlett. Your mother will be here soon, so let's wait outside.
Okay.
As we headed to the entrance, feeling the reluctance, Scarlett suddenly seemed to remember something. Right. I forgot. She rummaged through her small bag and pulled out a white envelope. What's this? It's a letter I got from Grandma. She told me to read it in secret, away from Caleb. From Mom? Thank you. I received the letter from Scarlett. Right then, my sister arrived to pick Scarlett up, so I handed her over. After seeing Scarlett off, I quietly looked inside the envelope. It wasn't mailed but delivered through Scarlett, which seemed overly cautious. What could it contain? I casually read through and was stunned.
What? You're kidding, right?
The content was too astonishing to believe immediately. But my mother wouldn't fabricate such a lie.
If this is true, I need to verify it.
I hurried back to Caleb. As soon as I returned, Caleb spoke in a coddling tone. Did Scarlett leave? Yes, my sister just picked her up. Got it. Hey Evelyn, I'm thirsty. Wake me up and get me some juice or something. Ignoring his request, I swiftly pulled back the comforter and reached for Caleb's pants.
What? Evelyn?
Without hesitation, I pulled his pants down.
What are you doing all of a sudden?
Caleb yelled, frantically trying to pull his pants back up. I sighed at the scene unfolding before me. It seems Mom was right.
Hey! What's the deal with suddenly pulling down someone's pants? Are you taking advantage of my inability to move? That's awful, isn't it?
Caleb looked up at me, bewildered. Indeed, doing it without saying anything was wrong. But I wouldn't have been able to confirm it otherwise.
Hey! Are you listening?
Caleb raised his voice again, seeing me silent and looking down. Seriously. This uncertainty about the future is unbearable. Maybe it's time to break up? I said his thoughts out loud, and Caleb looked at me in surprise. Oh, you seem almost happy about it? Your face is giving you away. Caleb, looking flustered, covered his mouth. Happy? No way. But maybe you're right. With this condition, I'll just be a burden. Maybe it's better we part ways. Caleb sighed heavily, exuding a sense of resignation. I don't mind, you know? I'll take care of you. We vowed at our wedding, remember? In sickness and in health.
Eh? No, but...
Besides, it's not all bad. We can still talk like before. And now, I won't have to fret over your affairs anymore.
Eh?
I smirked mischievously.
Oh, me? An affair?
His eyes darted around. His lie transparent. Don't worry. You may have been capable before, but now, you can't move by yourself. You won't be able to cheat anymore. Now you're all mine. Caleb let out a small
yelp
and turned pale.
Evelyn, actually, I was planning to leave you.
That's fine. Leave it to me.
But I feel terrible about this.
Don't feel guilty. We're a couple, after all. Despite my reassuring smile, Caleb trembled like a cornered deer.
But
Just rest for now. I'll go prepare dinner. Caleb couldn't say anything more. I left the room. Certainly, I'd cornered Caleb. He'd surely take some action. I had believed Caleb was truly hemiplegic. It was the clinic of Abigail's father. I wanted to have it checked at a larger hospital, but Caleb resisted, so it never happened. Now I understand why he was so reluctant about hospitals and treatment. Immediately after leaving the room, I listened at the door. I'd left it slightly ajar, so Caleb wouldn't notice. I couldn't see inside, but I could hear everything Caleb did.
help! I'm in trouble.
Soon, I heard him speaking to someone. He was on the phone. Speaking softly, perhaps wary of me.
That's what she said. Before bringing up divorce, she insisted we won't separate. What should I do? Escape? Impossible. I'm too scared. She must know about you and me. She's unusually persistent about infidelity. She must know already.
I heard it all. Now it was clear. Caleb was on the phone with his affair partner, Abigail.
Please. Say it's a call from the hospital. Get me admitted somewhere else, any hospital. Otherwise, I don't know what Evelyn might do.
As Caleb pleaded with the person on the phone, I knocked on the door. Caleb? Are you on the phone? May I come in?
Oh. I'll hang up now.
After waiting a moment, I entered to find Caleb looking paler than before, lying in bed.
You look worse than before. Are you okay? Oh, I'm fine. Well, maybe not. Can you take me to the hospital?
Of course, that sounds serious. I'll contact the hospital right away. Ah, thank you. He looked genuinely relieved. Thinking this was his ticket out. He's sorely mistaken. The real game is just beginning. I'll expose everything about Caleb and Abigail at the hospital. Upon arrival, Abigail greeted us.
Caleb. Are you okay? Abigail. Thanks. I'm feeling a bit off. After what happened, it's understandable.
Abigail smiled knowingly and looked at Caleb tenderly.
Can I rest for a bit? I might even need to be admitted.
He's not even a doctor to be making such decisions. But Abigail nodded understandingly and led us to a private room. We don't usually do admissions, but my father will come to check on you when he's available. Please wait here until then. About half an hour later, Abigail returned with a doctor. I had met him before. He's the clinic's director, Abigail's father. You're feeling unwell? Yes. Their exchange of glances was awkward. As Abigail's father raised his stethoscope to his ears, I raised my hand. Let's cut the act, shall we?
What?
Caleb, Abigail, and her father. All froze, except for me.
Evelyn, what are you suddenly saying?
Ignoring Caleb's protest, I grabbed his pants like before and yanked them down forcefully.
Whoa! What are you doing? Stop it!
Caleb scrambled to pull his pants back up.
As I said before, something's off, right? Are you worried that if I become hemiplegic and useless as a man? I see. You were only after my body. I'm disappointed.
Caleb pretended to be upset, not noticing the expressions of the others in the room. After your body? Unfortunately, I'm not as lewd as you guys. What did you say? You still haven't realized? Realized what? As Caleb tilted his head, Abigail whispered in his ear. Finally understanding, Caleb's eyes widened in shock.
No, this is, well, that.
Hemiplegic? You moved too quickly for that. Everything's been exposed. Why keep up this poor act? The letter from my mother had only a few lines.
I've looked into it, and there's a high chance Caleb's hemiplegia is an act, perhaps a lie to leave Evelyn? Maybe try pulling down his pants to see his reaction?
Following my mother's advice led to this revelation. In a panic, Caleb, who was supposedly unable to move his right hand, easily pulled up his pants.
So it was all an act from the start. No, that's not. Explain everything.
Sweating profusely, Caleb complied. The day of the accident, the person riding next to Caleb in the car was Abigail. They were in the midst of an affair.
The injuries were minor for both of us, but the car was badly damaged. I thought if the police got involved, Evelyn would find out. So I figured if I pretended to be severely injured, I could cover it up.
The absurdity of it all left me speechless.
Did you think you could keep up such a ridiculous life forever? No, well. Or was it all to hide your affair? That's not it.
Before Caleb could respond, Abigail interrupted.
Caleb was just trying to spare you the pain of a breakup. After all, finding out about an affair during a drive would be humiliating. So he told a kind lie about being hemiplegia, hoping for a smooth separation.
Kind? How is cheating with someone much younger than himself, and then lying about it, kind?
Stop it. Our love is real.
Abigail said this proudly, but Caleb, shrinking in the background, looked like his elaborate lie had caught up to him.
Is that so? Then you should have been upfront about it. Right, Abigail's father?
Abigail's father flinched. His forehead glistened with more sweat than Caleb's.
Well. The moment I realized the hemiplegia was a lie, I had a lot to say to you. Me? What might that be?
Abigail's father looked at me with a forced smile. Perhaps he couldn't abandon his daughter. I felt sorry for him, but as a doctor, he did something he shouldn't have done.
I guess you just listened to your daughters, please, but how did you feel watching me break down in tears? Don't you have any professional pride? Wasn't it empty to go as far as forging a medical report?
Abigail's father seemed to catch his breath. He began to speak, carefully choosing his words.
That wasn't forgery. It was a diagnostic error.
How could such an obviously healthy man be mistakenly diagnosed as hemiplegia? He probably wanted to insist it was a mistake, not malicious forgery.
Well, as for me, it doesn't really matter. Fortunately, I have relatives in both the medical and legal fields, so I'll be consulting with them. What? You can't.
Abigail's father's complexion changed. Understandably so. For a private practitioner, reputation and client reviews are crucial. If it became known that he dirtied his hands as a doctor just to unite his daughter with her affair partner, the clinic's reputation would undoubtedly hit rock bottom.
Please, have mercy.
There's no mercy here.
I'll have my lawyer discuss the details with you later. Since Caleb seems to be in good health, please go back to your duties.
He was hardly in the state of mind for work, but it was true that other patients were waiting. The calls of the nurses had been audible for a while. Yet, Abigail's father, who had been reluctant to leave, was finally forced out by me, barely able to walk, and exited the room. That left Abigail, Caleb, and me. In the silent room, I reconsidered the situation. On the day of the accident, Caleb was with Abigail, engaged in their affair. Right after the accident, given the proximity to the scene, they sought medical attention at Abigail's father's clinic. Perhaps it was then that Abigail conceived the idea. Could she keep Caleb for herself this way? It's unclear if Caleb had contemplated divorce, but it's unlikely all this was just to conceal an affair. It's more probable that Abigail persuaded him. For Caleb, who always wanted to quit his job, the allure of a doctor's daughter, a sign of wealth, was irresistible. Moreover, claiming hemiplegia would serve as an excuse to leave his job. He probably thought that if he used this as a pretext to break up before the affair was exposed, everything would neatly resolve. But that was a flawed plan from the start. I knew about their affair even before Caleb's accident. Though I lost the opportunity to confront them amidst the confusion of the accident, now that their lies were exposed, I had all the leverage. There was plenty of evidence.
Well then.
I looked slowly at the two of them. Caleb was sitting on the bed, and Abigail stood beside him.
Regarding what comes next, I want a divorce.
Surprised by my statement, Caleb and Abigail exchanged looks.
A divorce, is that okay? Okay or not, I've known about your affair for a long time. I've been preparing to leave since then.
Caleb looked conflicted, and Abigail's eyes sparkled.
So Caleb and I can be together. We don't have to meet in secret anymore.
Despite their bold meetings, it seemed they had been trying to keep it discreet.
Yes, after we divorce, you're free to do as you please. However, there are conditions for the divorce. Conditions?
Abigail frowned in confusion.
Yes, don't worry, it's nothing serious. First, I'll be seeking compensation from both Caleb and Abigail. Additionally, there will be no division of assets. I'll be keeping all the savings. That's all. Isn't that a bit unfair, Evelyn?
Unfair?
Have you forgotten that for the 5 years we've been married, I've covered most of our living expenses? That alone is more than the savings.
Caleb, notorious for his laziness, has never held a job for long. His income was unstable and significantly lower than his peers. Moreover, he was a big spender, still not having paid off debts from before our marriage.
Sure, Evelyn has helped me, but I've been working hard too.
He seemed dissatisfied with the idea of handing over all the savings. Caleb stuttered and struggled to find the right words. I didn't want to prolong this confrontation and was considering setting a later date to talk things through when, unexpectedly, Abigail came to Caleb's rescue.
Caleb! We've come this far, haven't we? Don't worry about money. Dad's here, and I'll take care of everything. More than anything, I want us to freely express our love as soon as possible.
Abigail.
Love conquers all.
In front of his soon-to-be ex-wife, the audacity of their display was astounding. What did Abigail see in him? That was a lingering question, but her intervention wrapped things up.
All right, I'll leave the divorce papers, compensation, and the specifics to my lawyer. I'll send your belongings to Abigail's place.
I suppose we won't be seeing each other anymore.
Well then.
Take care. The two, already acting like a couple, cozied up to each other. I remembered something I had almost forgotten to mention.
Oh, right. Don't forget to keep up with the child support payments. And try to at least make the interest payments on your debt.
Abigail looked up at Caleb, standing beside her, in disbelief.
What, child support? Debt? What's that about? Didn't you know? He has a child with his ex-wife. Oh, and don't get me wrong. I didn't steal him from his previous marriage. Caleb was already divorced when we met.
A bit agitated.
And the debt?
Abigail asked.
It was there even before we married. So, I don't know what it's for. How much is it? About $30,000, I believe.
I smiled as I informed her, and Abigail's face went pale. Understandably so. With the added burden of paying me compensation, plus child support and debt, it's enough to make one feel faint.
But we can work hard together to pay it off, right?
Abigail, trying to motivate herself, clenched her fist and turned to face Caleb. Caleb.
Yeah!
And he nodded vaguely.
Good for you, Caleb. You've got such a positive partner in Abigail. That should motivate you to find a new job. New job?
Abigail's eyes were empty.
Yes, because after this incident, Caleb hastily resigned. Now he's officially unemployed. He has no qualifications, so getting a full-time job might be challenging. But love conquers all, right? You'll manage.
Abigail muttered under her breath.
But still, there's that issue,
she said. Abigail was clearly in shock, and Caleb was panicking. I waved goodbye to the two of them and left the hospital. Later, the divorce was finalized without issue. To my slight concern, Abigail's father paid all the compensation. Probably fearing that I might spill everything. Considering the potential fallout if this incident became public, he probably thought it was a small price to pay. This cleared all obstacles for Caleb and Abigail. However, they didn't remarry immediately. Caleb was pushing for it.
Right away.
But, well, maybe. Abigail was hesitating. Furthermore, the two of them were constantly fighting, with Caleb never finding a job and Abigail reluctant to make their relationship official. Even if you think someone is your destiny, it's understandable to hesitate when faced with such a hopeless case. In my situation, by the time I realized everything, I had already grown too attached to Caleb. If it wasn't for that, I would have left him much sooner. Thanks to all this, I'm now enjoying a peaceful life for the first time in a while. At first, I thought I might feel lonely. Caleb, despite his many problems, was good at entertaining and pampering people. But once he was gone, I realized how much more comfortable life could be. No more sudden demands for sweets, no more all-night gaming sessions. Some might find that exciting, but it was too much for my 30s body. Now I can take care of myself, live each day with ease, and not always on the edge. No more stretching beyond my limits. I'm looking forward to a life that fits me, without overextending or pushing too hard. So, how about giving Mom back to us? My brother Ralph and his wife, who selfishly abandoned our mom Melanie, on their own terms, now come to demand her return as if it's their right, without even an apology. I'm embarrassed and ashamed that such a despicable man is my brother. My name is Allegra. I'm 38, working while raising 2 daughters, aged 7 and 5. I married Lucas, my colleague, and we're still working at different branches of the same company. Lucas is kind and helpful with childcare and housework, but when we hit our busy season, both of us are swamped at work. At that time, finishing late and rushing to pick up our kids from daycare and school. We decided to work together as a couple, but I feel like crying because of physically and mentally exhausted. My mom, who lives about a 30-minute drive away, supports me through these times. Also today, beaten by the busy season and unable to cook, she brought a load of her homemade dishes. When Mom opens the door, my daughters rush to her as if they've been waiting.
Grandma! Welcome back! Oh, it should be hello first.
Ignoring my amused reaction, my daughter takes Mom's hand and leads her into the house.
My girls just adore their kind and fun-loving grandma.
Allegra, I also bought your favorite pudding. Have some with the kids later.
Mom, thank you. Delicious meals, playing with the kids, and even caring for me, I'm deeply grateful to Mom.
But then, her mobile phone rings, it shattering the peaceful moment.
Hi, got it. I'll be back soon.
After hanging up, Mom sighs softly.
From Cheryl? Yes. She wants me to buy a cheesecake from that new bakery.
More of Cheryl's whims. You had kind of same issue before.
Cheryl doesn't work, she should buy it herself. I know. But she's hurt because of Ralph. I need to be kind to her.
Mom, if they ask too much, promise you'll tell me, okay? Thank you. Mom smiles brightly, for reassuring me.
Still, I can't help but worry about Mom's relationship with Ralph's family.
Ever since Dad passed away 2 years ago, Mom's been living with Ralph and his wife. During the discussion about Dad's inheritance, Ralph and his wife suggested Mom to live together. Mom, who suffered from mother-in-law and daughter-in-law conflicts, initially refused it.
But Ralph insisted and was wanting to live with Mom at any cost.
When I probed further, it turned out Ralph had been fired few months ago. He messed up something and couldn't find work in the same industry. Now he got another job, but its salary drastically reduced. Unable to afford his high-rise apartment with a monthly rent of $2,000, he wanted to inherit the family home in exchange for taking care of Mom.
It wasn't out of concern for Mom living alone, but for money. I advised against it, saying it would only bring stress, and Cheryl, who was unemployed, could work to support themselves. However, Cheryl, my sister-in-law, cried out. But Ralph promised during his proposal that I wouldn't need to work ever.
She was adamant about not working. Eventually, Mom gave in and agreed to the living arrangement, as blaming Ralph for breaking his promise to Cheryl. Since moving in, Cheryl was feeling betrayed by Ralph, stays in her room, surfing the web or playing online games. She leaves all the housework and shopping to Mom, making her run errands like today. It's frustrating to see Mom being taken advantage by Cheryl. Even when I express my concern for Mom's well-being to Ralph, he, feeling guilty towards Cheryl, just avoids the issue. And Mom, she just says, "It's Ralph's fault," and gives in to Cheryl's demands. It seems Cheryl resorts to verbal abuse when things don't go her way. Mom is completely innocent in this. Feeling helpless about how to improve the situation for Mom, and frustrated that I couldn't do anything, a worst-case scenario unfolded. One weekend. Got something to discuss. Unexpectedly, Ralph came to our house. I had a bad feeling, but sent the kids and Lucas to the park and welcomed Ralph into the living room. Ralph, looking conspicuously gloomy, sipped the tea I prepared and then started speaking gravely. "You know about the bad blood between Cheryl and Mom, right?" "Well, yeah," I said ambiguously. "It's more like Cheryl is just using Mom for her own benefit." Ralph seems oblivious to my reaction, nodded exaggeratedly. "Cheryl's so stressed about it, it's a real problem." "Huh. I think it's Mom who looks worse off. I'm her husband, I need to prioritize Cheryl." "Huh. That's admirable, a true model of husband." "So, I've decided Mom should move out." "Huh." His outrageous statement made me yell in disbelief. "Kicking out Mom? Not Ralph and his wife? No way! Why should Mom leave?" Ralph was visibly shaken by my outburst, continued his selfish reasoning. "No choice. Cheryl's been crying and saying she can't live with Mom anymore." "Then Ralph should leave." "That's impossible. You know, my salary dropped from $100,000 to $40,000. I can't survive if I leave that house." "That's because you got yourself fired. If Cheryl doesn't want to lower her living standards, she should work." "Nah, Cheryl really doesn't want to work." "That's all Ralph and Cheryl's convenience. Don't make Mom clean up Ralph's mess anymore. How about Mom, living on her pension, supposed to survive if she's kicked out of her house?" I couldn't believe how selfish this couple was. Anger boiling over, I fiercely accused Ralph, who darted his eyes around in panic. Then he dropped a bombshell. "I get it, I do. Your anger. But aren't you forgetting something?" "What?" "The house is in my name." His chilling words froze my heated mind. That was under the condition that Ralph would take care of Mom, right? Yeah, but, you know, situations change. Ideals and reality differ. Why is this someone else's problem to you? Can't help it. No matter what you say, legally, that house is mine. Ralph smirked smugly. Ah, this man, he planned to kick out Mom all along. You are despicable. I hurled the word at him, filled with all my contempt. Ralph looked down at me with cold eyes, his mouth twisted oddly, laughing. Ha ha ha. After laughing and popping a snack into his mouth, Ralph went away and left me trembling with anger. Anger, sadness, disappointment. My head was swirling with negative emotions. Above all, thinking of Mom, betrayed by Ralph, made my heart ache, almost bringing me to tears. I can't let Mom get hurt anymore. I have to protect Mom. That night, after the kids were asleep, I told Lucas about what happened during the day. Holding back tears, with a trembling voice, I shared my story. Lucas, deep in thought for a while after hearing me, finally spoke slowly. Hey, how about we invite Melanie to stay with us? Eh? I was taken aback by Lucas's suggestion. I had intended to invite Mom to live nearby. So Lucas's suggestion was more than I could have hoped for. Is that okay? Why not? Melanie has done so much for us. It's about time we can repay her kindness. I'm actually happy about it. Lucas said, smiling in a way that made him look almost divine. Lucas, thank you. Sure thing. It's been a while since our family grew. I resolved to love this playful man for the rest of my life. A month later we made up our minds. I went to my parents' house to bring Mom to our home. This house now belongs to Ralph. Never set foot in here again. I'll never forget Cheryl's harsh parting words. Mom was downcast in the car and stood anxiously at our front door when we arrived. My heart ached at her sight, and I was lost for words. It was my daughters who melted Grandma's worries, bursting out of the house with smiles.
Grandma, come in quick. We're having a party today. It's a welcome party for Grandma, Dad said so. Sis and I decorated your room. And there's cake too. Look, look.
Lila, Marla.
Melanie, welcome home.
Lucas. Touched by the welcome from my daughter and Lucas, Mom's eyes moistened. I too wiped away hidden tears.
Mom's insurance money from Dad, and nearly everything else, had been siphoned off to support Ralph's family. It seemed they let Mom go because there was nothing left to exploit. Really, they're just the worst. And so it began our life with Mom. Initially, I worried about burdening Lucas, despite his kindness in taking Mom in. But that concern quickly vanished.
Because Mom's housekeeping skills were incredible.
Coming home from work, I'd find delicious smells, a clean house, and neatly folded laundry. When I realized vegetables were growing in planters what used to be full of random flowers, and my vegetable-hating daughter was happily harvesting and munching on them. Before I knew it, Mom had even become friends with the neighbors, chatting in gardens I had never visited. Not wanting to leave everything to Mom, I joined her in the kitchen when work was less demanding. But I couldn't come close to matching her efficiency and flair.
I used to be terrible at housework. My mother-in-law always scolded me.
Mom would say, and laughing. Eating her perfect dishes, I was constantly reminded of Mom's incredible skills as a homemaker and the effort it took to get there. Thanks to Mom's magic-like homemaking, Lucas and I could fully dedicate ourselves to work. Especially Lucas, who, since Mom moved in, his sales performance significantly improved and even topped the branch for the first time.
Melanie is like a goddess of fortune,
Lucas said with admiring eyes, while Mom just chuckled. On weekends, no longer filled with chores meant more time with the kids. The newfound ease in Mom and Dad's lives brought more smiles to our children's faces during the weekdays. There have been other changes too, but living with Mom has definitely been a positive for us. Of course, we still have things to adjust to with each other, but work and private life are going almost frighteningly well. On the other hand, things haven't been going well for Ralph and his wife since Mom left. After Mom's departure, Cheryl initially enjoyed the mother-in-law-free life, and Ralph seemed relieved seeing Cheryl so happy.
But it appeared they hadn't really adjusted to a life without Mom's support.
Cleaning was minimal, walls stayed dirty, and the garden was neglected. Laundry piled up for a week, washed but never put away. Garbage accumulated because sorting was too bothersome.
In no time, the house turned into a neglected mess, overrun with weeds and looking like a dirty junkyard inside and out.
Of course, meals were all about eating out and deliveries.
Under such living conditions, it's no wonder work wasn't going well.
Ralph, who had been fairly enthusiastic about his new job before kicking Mom out, fell ill often due to his unhealthy lifestyle. And faced the threat of being fired again due to constant lateness and absenteeism.
The neighbors, who had been fond of the kind and sociable Mom, could never welcome Ralph and his wife.
They weren't harassed, but they were definitely left out. This tragic situation of the Ralphs was relayed by Mom's friend, who lives nearby. Moreover, their house is a 45-year-old wooden structure. Without careful maintenance, it's prone to problems.
The neglected water heater broke down, and Cheryl, who disliked letting others into the house, that's why it LEDs for days on end with only cold water in the winter. In spring, a wasp nest formed under the eaves, and Cheryl, who hadn't noticed, got stung badly.
Of course, with Ralph and his wife's scant earnings and constant spending, money was tight.
Cheryl, cooped up in her room, seemed low cost at a glance, but it turns out she was spending about $1,000 a month on online gaming.
With over half of Ralph's salary was vanishing into gaming expenses, Ralph finally realized the gravity of the situation and wanted to stop Cheryl's gaming habit. It makes daily arguments between a desperate Ralph and a Cheryl unwilling to quit.
So, I was thinking, maybe we could get Mom back. What do you mean, so?
Just 6 months after separating from Mom, Ralph came asking to take her back, without an apology, earning nothing but contempt. Lucas, standing next to me, had an expressionless face.
It's just that ever since Mom left, it's been one misfortune after another.
It's not misfortune, it's just the result of your own actions. Wouldn't things be solved if Cheryl did some housework and got a job? Well. Ralph glanced at Cheryl, who averted her eyes. Clearly, Cheryl had no intention of doing anything, just wanting Mom back as a convenient slave. Nothing but contempt for the selfish and dependent Ralph couple. At that moment, Mom appeared from the living room. Though I had told her she could stay hidden, the commotion over her must have piqued her interest. Ralph, my child. Mom's face was expressionless too. Yet Ralph happily addressed her.
Mom. You heard, right? You want to return to the house Dad built, don't you? Cheryl, too, says it's better with you around. Cheryl, is that true?
Well, yeah. Cheryl mumbled a response, looking down. Despite her clear lack of enthusiasm, Ralph said,
See, Cheryl is happy too. Let's go home.
He reached out his hand to Mom. Mom gazed at Ralph's hand. Mom, who cherished the house she had with her husband. Mom, who couldn't quite abandon Ralph. My heart raced at the thought of the compassionate Mom returning to Ralph's side again. But the next moment, Mom swatted his hand away.
I'm not going back. What? I never want to live with you two again. Mom! Mom!
I exclaimed in surprise, and Ralph in despair.
Why? Your son is in trouble. You used to say that parents should help their children when they fail.
As Ralph lamented and Cheryl looked on in shock, Mom spoke calmly. I used to think that too. But I was wrong.
What?
Living with Allegra and her husband made me see. When Allegra failed, her husband Lucas supported her, and when Lucas and I had awkward moments, Allegra, as his wife, would step in and resolve them. That's what marriage is about, supporting and growing with each other. Mom. I felt tears welling up at Mom's words. It was also my fault for not letting go. I thought that as a mother, I was responsible for my son's actions regardless how old he gets.
But I realized that by always stepping in, I was robbing you of the chance to grow as people and as a couple. You're 40 now. Your time of parental obligation is long past. Clean up your own mess. But Mom...
Rejected by Mom, Ralph, a big man, flustered in a way he'd never imagined. Ignoring him, Mom turned to Cheryl, who was irritably biting her nails. Cheryl, the promise to be a housewife forever was only with Ralph. I have no obligation to take care of a stranger. You don't have to work, but live a life that suits that choice. Cheryl glared at Mom resentfully. But Mom didn't care anymore. Ralph, you inherited that house. You can continue living there or sell it. But I'm done doing anything for you and your wife. But Mom, I...
Go home. And don't ever show your face to me again.
Frightened by Mom's ferocity for the first time, Ralph fled. Cheryl, left behind, glared at us fiercely before following Ralph. Mom, drained, slumped to the ground. Before I could rush to her, Lucas was already at her side. That felt refreshing. Nice job, Mom. Lucas offered his hand with a smile, and Mom grasped it, smiling happily. However, the Ralph couple, still dependent on others, didn't change easily. Ralph, devastated by Mom's rejection, neglected his job even more. Cheryl didn't work, eventually resorting to loans for gaming expenses. By the time Ralph noticed Cheryl's debt, it was too late. Debt collectors came every day, the house was seized for unpaid taxes, and the couple, with nowhere to go, declared bankruptcy. Ralph was fired again and now works long hours at a live-in factory in the mountain, where taught by scary people. Of course with Cheryl. Cheryl, unaccustomed to real work, seems to be going insane every day in the harsh labor and internet-free environment. Ralph frightened by her craziness.
I want to divorce and return.
He begged, but I replied.
The family home you took was auctioned off because of you. You have no place to return to, so live happily ever after with Cheryl.
Then he broke down crying pitifully.
How foolish. The only brother I share blood with, but that's all I can think.
7 years later. Celebrating our 15th wedding anniversary, my husband and I were on a trip to Anchorage. Mom suggested we celebrate as a couple while she looked after the kids. Our middle school daughters, still adoring Grandma, were excited about a pajama party with her, posting on social media. Lucas and I have been successful in our careers, with him in a significant position at headquarters and me working hard as a branch manager.
We're grateful to Mom for supporting our lives. And to kind-hearted Lucas for living harmoniously with her. I wish we could go to the zoo too. Anchorage is too big, so it can't cover in just a 2-night, 3-day trip. We can come back for the next anniversary again.
Thinking of a future still together in 5-10 years. I felt fortunate to have met Lucas, munching happily on delicious food.
Mom's been in an accident and taken to the hospital. Please, take me to the hospital.
I pleaded with my husband Fred, tears streaming down my face. I had just received word that my mother, Lisa, was involved in a traffic accident and is in critical condition, unconscious. However, upon hearing the situation, he said, I'm off to a company trip now, so it's impossible. And with that, he refused my earnest request. Even as I persisted, he just mocked me as if he were enjoying my misery.
For me, the trip is more important. After all, visiting your mother, who is a stranger to me, is just a waste of time. I'm definitely not going.
I am Michelle, 29 years old. I married Fred, a year my senior, 2 years ago, and we've been living a dual-income life. We met in the same university club. My club had many members, so it wasn't easy to talk to everyone, but we became close after sitting next to each other at a dinner party one day. Additionally, we both discovered we were only children who grew up in single-mother households after losing our fathers early, which brought us closer quickly. We started going out together often and naturally progressed to dating. After we both became working adults and got used to our jobs, he proposed to me. Both of us are fulfilled with our jobs, so we haven't thought about children yet. However, we do want them eventually and have talked about buying a detached house when the time comes. Currently, we're renting a condo and live close to our respective childhood homes. Since both our fathers have passed away, our moms, my mother Lisa and his mother Amelia, live alone and get along very well. They are close in age and have bonded over raising their children alone without remarrying. So, after our initial meeting before marriage, they became friends, often having coffee or traveling together. I was surprised they became so close, but my mother looks so happy with Amelia, so I'm glad they met. Amelia is also very fond of me, and our relationship is good. However, Fred seems displeased that she prioritizes my mother over him. He has a strong mama's boy trait. Even before our marriage, I could tell he cherished his mother greatly, which I understood, coming from a single-mother household. However, not long after we started living together, I saw his true nature. One holiday, my mother sent a message with a picture of her having lunch with Amelia. It's lunchtime with Amelia, the message read, accompanied by a photo of their smiling faces, which made me smile too.
Hey Fred, looks like our moms are having lunch. Look, she sent a picture.
I showed the image to Fred, who was at home, but he made a face in annoyance.
What's this, some kind of harassment towards me?
What? What are you talking about? At that time, I didn't know he disliked my mother. He was often quiet around her, but I thought it was because our marriage was new and he was nervous. I never imagined he'd resent her for being close with his mother.
Because of her, Mom has been turning down my invitations for meals, saying she has plans with Lisa. Doesn't your mom know how to show some restraint?
I was shocked to hear he think like this and speak ill of my mother. Amelia seemed to have realized early on that he disliked my mother. During a dinner out with the four of us, Amelia scolded him for his sarcastic remarks towards my mother.
Fred, what is your attitude towards Lisa? Enough is enough.
What? Mom, you always take her side. You've always said I'm your precious son. It's not funny to prioritize someone you've only recently become close with over your own son.
Fred argued back, but I couldn't help but find his attachment to Amelia abnormal. Later, when Fred wasn't around, Amelia apologized to me and my mom.
I spoiled him too much. I'm really sorry. You don't need to worry about it. I don't mind either. He just loves you so much.
My mother is a gentle and calm person, usually not one to get angry. Even now, she seemed to accept his behavior without blame, but I could tell she was hurt inside. And without considering her feelings, Fred worsened his attitude as days passed. Amelia defended my mother, so he never attacked her openly. But every time he saw my mother and Amelia getting along, he would complain to me, and eventually, he started bad-mouthing her regularly. Not long after our second wedding anniversary, I couldn't take it anymore and had a big fight with him. After a heated argument, we didn't resolve the fundamental issue, and since then, our relationship became awkward and our conversations decreased. Lately, he's been coming home late and going out alone on weekends more often. I thought it was strange and asked him directly.
I'm just busy with work. Lots of overtime and weekend shifts lately.
He said so. But I wasn't convinced and couldn't shake off my unease. Then one day. On that Sunday, both of us off work, Fred was packing in the morning. Apparently, there was no work today. As I wondered why he was packing, my phone rang with an unknown number. Picking up, I was surprised to hear it was the police. They confirmed I was the daughter of Lisa, then dropped the unbelievable news.
Your mother has been in a traffic accident.
I was stunned.
She has.
She was already taken to the hospital, unconscious and in critical condition. After getting the hospital's name, I ended the call with shaking hands. Tears welled up, and I struggled to think, but knew I had to get to the hospital. But since I don't drive, I desperately asked Fred for help.
Fred, it's terrible. Mom's been in an accident and taken to the hospital. Please, we need to go now.
But upon hearing that, he just looked at me with disdain.
Huh? I'm about to leave for a company trip. I'll miss the meeting time if I help you. Figure it out yourself.
He flatly refused my plea.
A company trip? I didn't know it was today.
Now I understood the packing, but he had never told me about the trip. Moreover, I was stunned to hear it was a 2-week trip.
It's not the time for a trip. What if Mom?
Annoying. The trip is more important to me. After all, your mother is just a stranger to me, not related by blood. Visiting your mother is a waste of time. I'm definitely not going.
He threw these hurtful words at me with a sneer.
Move, I'm busy. I have a plane to catch.
He pushed me aside, humming while packing his clothes in a travel bag. Furious, I said,
You're the worst. Just do whatever you want.
I left the house and rushed to the hospital by taxi. He left for his trip as planned. He had no idea what was happening back home. I tried calling him several times, but couldn't reach him for 2 weeks. 2 weeks later, he returned home in high spirits. I looked at him coldly.
I need to go give Mom her souvenir. I wonder how she's doing.
He said optimistically, but I didn't respond and just followed him quietly to his mother's house. On the way, he happily talked about the souvenirs he bought for Amelia. Not once did he mention concern for my mother. As we arrived and he was about to open the door, he paused.
Huh? Why is it locked?
He seemed puzzled as he noticed the front door was locked. Since Amelia usually didn't lock the door when she was home.
Is Mom not at home?
He muttered. Pushing him aside, I took out the key to the Amelia's house from my bag and opened the door.
Hey, why do you have the house key?
He looked bewildered, but I didn't respond. Entering the house before me, he tilted his head in confusion when he didn't see Amelia. As he started towards the living room, not that way. This way. I called out to stop him. Leading him to a room in the back, its door wide open, we saw a brand new photo of Amelia.
What?
He was speechless, shaking as he stared at the photo. Then turned to me, almost crying.
Hey, what's this all about? What's going on?
I sighed deeply, holding back my anger, and explained. She passed away while you were on your trip. The funeral's already over. He glared at me, furious.
Don't joke, that's impossible. Why should she die? Wasn't it your mom who was in the accident and in a coma? If anyone should have died, it's that old woman.
I was disgusted by his insensitive outburst, but calmly told him what happened after my mother's accident. My mom woke up safely. She has a fracture and is undergoing rehab but is gradually recovering. My mother was still hospitalized, but thanks to medical professionals, she was alive. However, he was not convinced.
So, why did my mom?
I hesitated to answer.
It seems she was heading to our house on the day my mother had her accident.
She was also involved in a car accident. And I asked, did you tell her about your company trip?
What? I surely did.
She was suspicious of you recently. You weren't in touch much. She probably wanted to check if you were really on a business trip. His eyes widened. Amelia had mentioned a month ago that he had stopped contacting her as often. And when she called him in emergencies, he'd either not answer or hang up quickly, claiming he was busy. Though she initially thought he was just becoming less dependent on her as he aged, she began to suspect he was hiding something. So, filled with distrust, she was on her way to our house to confirm the company trip, just when I received the call about my mother's accident. Amelia had passed away carrying some sweets she bought with my mother when they had gone out, likely planning to visit our house under that pretext. On that day, in my panic to get to the hospital, I didn't have the chance to inform her about my mother's accident. She probably walked from the nearest bus stop to our condo. She fell on the sidewalk and ran out onto the road. Due to the busy street, the approaching car slammed on its brakes but was unable to stop. An ambulance was called, but she had suffered a severe head injury. And then she passed away. After explaining all of those to Fred, I glared at him.
After learning about Amelia, I called you so many times.
For 2 weeks, no matter how hard I tried to reach him, he never answered his phone or responded to my messages. As there were no other relatives available to act as the chief mourner, I became the chief mourner and conducted her funeral. With my mother still in critical condition, I somehow managed the funeral without her actual son present.
This past 2 weeks, you've been ignoring my calls and having fun, haven't you? I've come to understand your true character.
I'm divorcing you. When I declared this, Fred collapsed to the floor, weeping loudly.
How dare you? How can you say something like that right after my mother's death? Now's not the time for a divorce. And I didn't contact you because I was always with my colleagues. I had no time.
Crying and making excuses, he only fueled my anger further.
Stop lying!
I raised my voice and took out a piece of paper from my bag, thrusting it in front of him. It was the itinerary of the company trip I found in his room.
It says here the company trip was from the 12th to the 19th, a week. But you left for the trip from the 5th to the 19th. You said right before leaving that the trip was for 2 weeks. So, what were you doing for that 1 week from the 5th to the 12th? That is... I know what you were doing. You were cheating, weren't you? And you spent this past week with your affair partner, right?
When I confidently confronted him, he stopped crying and began to panic.
What are you talking about? Cheating? Well, I took a week of paid leave and went on a trip with friends. You see, work has been busy lately, and I wanted a break.
Sick of his continued excuses, I took out a mobile phone from my pocket. Seeing it, his face turned pale. The mobile phone was his, found in his closet while he was on the trip. He likely had another phone in his bag, used specifically for communicating with his affair partner. He had claimed he couldn't contact me during the trip, but he left his regular phone at home, so it was impossible for him to notice any calls.
You've been lying all along. You left this phone at home to spend time with your affair partner.
I placed the mobile phone in front of him, and he began shaking, slamming his fist on the floor.
Yes. I've been fed up with you for a long time. I have someone else I love now.
He yelled defiantly and then,
And why did you know where I hid the phone? Don't tell me you searched my room while I was away.
His angry retort was exasperating. I glanced at Amelia's photo, apologizing to her in my heart for this display, and then spoke.
Amelia told me. What?
He stuttered. After a big fight with him over my mother, he started coming home late and often went out alone on weekends, claiming it was for work. As he became increasingly unreachable, I confided my suspicions to Amelia. She shared her own doubts and advised me.
That boy always had a habit of hiding things inconvenient for him since he was little. Bad test scores, a glass he accidentally broke that his father cherished. He always tucked them away in the very back of his closet. If you see several towels there, he's probably hiding something behind them.
After her death, I remembered her words, searched Fred's closet, and as expected, found the mobile phone.
She told you that.
He seemed deeply disappointed, realizing Amelia had doubted him. However, seeing his dejected figure,
With this incident, I will be filing for divorce and seeking compensation. I'm prepared to consult a lawyer and take this to court if necessary.
my heart remained unmoved. He groaned,
Hold on.
but, realizing he couldn't escape the truth, reluctantly agreed. Subsequently, we properly divided our assets, and the divorce was successfully finalized. However, the following month, just as my new life began to settle, I received a call from him. Reluctantly I answered, and he immediately shouted,
Michelle! Please, I need your help.
What is it now? What happened? I asked about his situation, and it turned out he was in trouble at work because they found out about Amelia's funeral. He had Amelia enrolled in his company's health insurance plan, so he had to submit her death certificate to the company. That led to the company finding out about her death for the first time, and they realized the funeral happened during his company trip. He was seen as an unfilial and unreasonable man by his colleagues for not attending his own mother's funeral. But he blamed me, claiming I hadn't informed him about the funeral. However, it probably wasn't a good idea to rush and tell so many people. His explanations to his coworkers and to his boss were inconsistent, and his story changed every time he told it. His contradictions became apparent, and his lies were eventually exposed. Already seen as an unreasonable man, his repeated lies made him a pariah at work, and he resigned in disgrace. Now without income, he is living off Amelia's inheritance back at the family home.
But the neighbors found out I didn't attend the funeral, and it's uncomfortable here. I thought about selling the house, but it's old and not selling.
Apparently, the neighbors also see him as a bastard son, making it awkward for him to even walk outside. He had been planning to quickly sell the family home and move, but there are no buyers for the old house.
I'm really in trouble now. So Michelle, let's start over. Remarry me, let's live together again.
Hearing so, I was disgusted. It was clear he was only reaching out because he was in trouble. Don't be ridiculous. I'm done with you. I'll never remarry you.
But please, I'm desperate.
I don't care about you anymore.
You should live with your affair partner.
I firmly rejected him, but he seemed lost for words.
No, actually, I've broken up with her.
It turned out the affair partner found out about Amelia's funeral, and from there, learned she was the other woman. He had hidden his marriage, and the angry woman broke up with him, leaving him alone.
That's your own fault. I wouldn't want to be with someone like you. Goodbye.
As I was about to hang up, he quickly said,
Wait! If you won't agree to remarry, I'll come to your house and talk directly. You're at your parents' house, right?
However, no, I'm not. I replied immediately.
Huh? Then where are you now? There's no way I'm telling you. Plus, I recently changed jobs, so there's no point in you waiting outside my old workplace. When I said goodbye, I told everyone that you might show up and to report you without hesitation.
I decided to sell my parents' house to put some distance between him and me after this incident. With my mother's consent, we sold the house. As for her, she had recently been discharged from the hospital, but was deeply distressed by the loss of her dear friend Amelia. That's why we moved to a quieter place to live together peacefully. As a result, I left my old job and found a new one.
Just tell me where you are, at least. I owe it to your mom, who took care of me all this time, to visit her.
He was desperate to find out where I was, but his words infuriated me, and I responded with a chill in my voice that surprised even myself. Took care of you? After all your disdain for my mom, don't bother with convenient words now. Besides, Mom said she never wants to see you again.
What? Wait, Michelle!
He was still yelling something, but I mercilessly ended the call. I then blocked his number and changed mine later. I later learned that he was struggling financially, apparently being sued for compensation by his affair partner for deceiving her. With no steady job, he couldn't take out loans, and was scraping by with day labor and part-time work while looking for full-time employment. My mother and I, having started our lives anew, are now able to remember Amelia without the stress of Fred's presence. She couldn't attend Amelia's funeral and hadn't yet had the chance to place flowers on her grave and pray silently, due to our hectic move after her discharge. She's still struggling to accept Amelia's death, sometimes crying as she looks at photos and videos of them together.
I really want to visit her soon,
she said wistfully, so I replied,
yes, let's plan a visit to her grave soon.
We're currently planning it, making sure not to accidentally run into Fred. Moving forward, I want to support her and enrich our lives in this new place.